Answer question number 1 in the name of the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by his statement that, quote, "Our approach is to put everyday New Zealanders at the heart of everything the government does so we can organise services around them"?
Mr. Speaker.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, the government has always been upfront and transparent with New Zealanders about what it's doing, what exactly it's funding and precisely where the money is coming from. Mr. Speaker, it's about trust, or trusts as the case may be, David.
You send a bottle of your wine, Prime Minister.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David
Mr.
Cunliffe.
Speaker, should a person facing charges in relation to the deaths of 29 Pike River miners have had those charges discharged in relation to $3.4 million?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to understand that the government ministers play no role in the decision that was taken. A decision was made by WorkSafe New Zealand about whether a successful prosecution could be undertaken, and the view was taken that a lot of money would be spent with lawyers, but actually not come to a positive outcome. On that basis, as Justice Farish herself said, the right conclusion was actually reached.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Minister.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Does the Prime Minister believe that the Pike River families feel that the government had their interests at heart when the charges against Mr. Whittle were discharged, thus preventing him ever being retried?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Firstly, Mr. Speaker, I think the Pike River families would know that in New Zealand we have a judicial system, and if the judge makes a call, as Justice Farish did, then they would respect that. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, actually, yes, I do think that the Pike River families would respect the fact that this is a government that has funded the re-entry up the drift, has at all times been honest and upfront with the Pike River families. I always find being honest and upfront a very important trait, as I'm sure does his colleagues.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, if New Zealanders are at the heart of everything he does, why did he or his negotiators agree that the Dinah Shipping Company could leave the Rena where it is if they pay $10.4 million?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we haven't agreed to that. What is the case is that the fishing or the owners of the Rena are likely to make an application to the Regional Council to leave the shipwreck there, and on that basis a decision will have to be made by the Regional Council and the Environment Court. But I'm interested in the fact that the Leader of the Opposition is actually talking about shipwrecks at the moment, because I wouldn't have thought he wouldn't worry about the Rena. It's his own leadership that's a shipwreck at the moment.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order. I've called the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Why won't the Prime Minister or his agencies release the economic and environmental impacts of the Rena salvage deal when the Mayor of Tauranga and iwi have called for as much to be disclosed as possible?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the fullness of time, I'm sure the Regional Council will consider all of the relevant information, and if required, so will the Environment Court. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm interested to see that the Leader of the Opposition thinks the biggest issue in New Zealand at the moment is whether there's a shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean rather than a shipwreck going on in the Labour Party caucus.
Order. This is a point of order, and it will be heard in silence.
Mr. Speaker, in the last two replies from the Prime Minister, he's breached Standing Order 383, as he has pretty much every day this year. But both times, the first time you stood up, the Prime Minister didn't sit down. He repeated it. You did get up. I wonder what penalty there is on the Prime Minister for consistently breaching that ruling and ignoring you getting to your feet.
Order. The member is right to quote 383, but if he also looks at 377, my job is to judge the content of the answer in light of the content of the questions. Now, if questions are asked that are very brief and concise, I will do my best to assist the questioner to get an answer that's equally brief and concise. Point of order. Grant Robertson.
In the last question asked by the Leader of the Opposition, I don't believe there was anything that breached Standing Order 377 at all. He asked why the Prime Minister or his agencies wouldn't release the economic impacts of the deal that the Mayor of Tauranga wanted. I don't think there was anything political in that question at all.
Order. And the member raises a reasonable point. There was an addition to that, as the Mayor had asked, etc. So it wasn't exactly a concise question. I will do my best, as I said to the member, if the questions are clear and concise, I will do my best to get an equally clear and concise answer. Further supplementary? Supplementaries, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Does the Prime Minister have the interests of all New Zealanders at heart when on Children's Day he's had to reveal that some 20,000 additional New Zealand children are growing up in poverty, bringing the total number to nearly 300,000, nearly one child in four? Or is there another issue that he thinks belongs closer to the hearts of New Zealanders?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, what is true is that there's been an error made by, as I understand it, Treasury and Stats New Zealand. I will say that that didn't in any way alter government policy, Mr Speaker, but if the member is asking a serious question about what the government is actually doing to support less well-off New Zealanders, then let's just have a look at that. They include, Mr Speaker, $2.5 billion a year being spent on working for families, $4.5 billion a year being spent on benefits, $1.8 billion a year on subsidising housing through income-related rents and the accommodation supplement. All state houses have been insulated that can be under this government. $350 million being spent to insulate 240,000 homes. $1.5 billion a year, Mr Speaker.
Order. I thank the Prime Minister for that answer, but I think at this stage is now long enough. Supplementary question. Supplementary question. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister really have every New Zealander at heart when his SOE Kiwi Rail has imported asbestos-ridden Chinese locomotives, despite the fact that the same manufacturer supplied contaminated locomotives to Australia? And can he guarantee New Zealanders asbestos-free workplaces?
Well, Mr Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I can confirm that that's in breach of the contract, as I understand, that Kiwi Rail signed, that Kiwi Rail are going to ensure that the suppliers resolve that issue. But as I say, Mr Speaker, it is absolutely fascinating that the Leader of the Opposition is focused on train wrecks and shipwrecks. Doesn't that sum it up for his week so far?
Order. Order. Order.
Point of order.
Order. Point of order. The Right Honourable Winston.
Mr Speaker, when a questioner is caught in the way the Prime Minister is behaving, your admonition is usually to say you will not be granted another question. What is your admonition for the Prime Minister who, despite your recent intervention, carries on concluding every question with an attack on the questioner?
I'm not sure exactly what the point of order the member's raising. Could he clarify?
Well, I'll clarify it for you. My point of order is that tacked on to every answer from the Prime Minister is a personal attack upon the questioner. In this case, unerringly, each time he's answered the questions. Now, my question is, when are we going to see him being admonished by you in the way that you've constantly and unerringly admonished questioners for doing the same thing?
Order. Now that I understand the point of order, as I said to Mr Robinson only a few minutes earlier, it is helpful if I can get a clear and concise question, then I can help the questioner get a clear and concise answer. When the answer is a little longer and often, sometimes, has a political flick, then it's likely to also get a political flick back. The Prime Minister, all I can do at the end of the day is when I see the Prime Minister going into an area which is not necessarily going to restore or bring order to the House, is stand and cease the Prime Minister from continuing with that answer. It would be a very serious offence for me to take a matter further and actually ask the Prime Minister to leave the chamber and not be available for members of any party to then ask the Prime Minister questions. Order. Order. I will hear further from the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, The rules of this House apply to every minister in this House, every member in this House, and there is no distinction. So with respect, if you're prepared to do that for questioner, that is, removed from the House, why are you drawing a distinction where the Prime Minister is concerned?
What I'm saying to the member is that I, with very much reluctance, ask any member to leave the House, but I will treat every member the same when there is an issue of disorder being created by that member, regardless of who that member is. If that is the ultimate punishment I have to deliver, with some regret, I will so deliver it. Further point of order, Grant Robertson.
Mr Speaker, I've got 2 points of order. The first is to follow on from that to say that, of course, there are other sanctions that are available. For instance, offering extra supplementary questions. It doesn't have to lead to the Prime Minister leaving the House or the Chamber, and you have previously added extra supplementary questions. My second point of order is a different one, which is that when you rise to your feet, Mr Speaker, throughout today, the Prime Minister has completed what he felt he wanted to say when you were on your feet. I think it's a different point of order, and it's one that will lead to further disorder in the House if he keeps doing that.
Speaking to the point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brown.
Mr Speaker, I feel obliged to make a comment, and that is to back up your assertion around Standing Order 377, where, in fact, the opening comments from the Honourable David Cunliffe in his speech did breach A of 1A. It went on to involve a breach of 1B. And while it did not go as far as breaching 1C, it went very close to it.
I thank the member. There will be occasions when, because of the particular year we're in, this is a debating chamber, there will be political barbs exchanged from one side to the other. And if members don't expect that to happen, then I suggest they are not going to see Parliament operate that way. As to regard the point made about further questions being given, that is a tactic I've used and use on occasion, and I will continue to use it when I think it is justified. Question number 2. Point of order, Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Sir, I'm concerned, actually, my point of order is around the respect given to you by both sides of the House when you stand to your feet. And I wonder if it is possible to speak to the sound people after today's session, that when you rise to your feet, the microphones are turned off so that we can actually hear you, sir, without hearing everybody else.
I'm sure that you will find, I will check that it's happening, but when I rise to my feet, I can assure anybody who's in the midst of an answer that their microphone is actually also cut off at the time. That's certainly the case. I'll check that that has happened. I thank the member for the point she raises. Question number 2, Ian McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. My question is to